Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Conodger, and this is Automation, the long-awaited return of the Vector Automotive Challenge. We are moving forward this time to a whole new era of automotive design. We had spent this series for quite some time now in the 60s, and rather than gradually move up through the early 70s, I have decided to move up to 1974. That is a year that is very interesting for American automotive design. It is the beginnings and right in the midst of the energy and oil crisis. A large part of the reason I'm doing this is because of the actual game we are playing right now. I have stated to the developers, and they are definitely working on this, but there is a massive lacking of late 60s to early 70s body designs. So in that era, I was really struggling to do anything unique or interesting, so I decided to, for the sake of the series, that we'll skip a few years. We'll assume that the models we built in the late 60s carried us through to 1974. Well, it is now 1974, and we need something to boost our company's reputation up, as our models are now getting, stagnated and stale. And I want to get into a new market that we have fumbled on in the past, and that is the small to mid-size sedan. So keep in mind that our company is based in the United States of America. This game is not based in the United States of America. It has its own economy, it has its own regions that somewhat emulate that, but somewhat don't. So we are in a little bit of a different era in the game than we are replicating in our, simulated, quote-unquote, timeline. But looking at the mid to early 70s American sedans, what a crappy era of cars. There is not much to look at in the way of exciting, innovative, or vehicles that, just think of it today. Think of how many of these cars are still around and were, held onto and kept because people wanted, people liked them. You see the 60s Falcons and stuff like that, the Novas. You don't see any of these 70s sedans around anymore. So the body that we have that is available to us in 1974 is this one. Its initial shape is not something that overly pleases me. However, this is the design that you see prevalent in this era. So this is what we have to work with, and I will try my best to make it work. The body styling and looks of this car, though, are not the thing we are really trying to overcome. It's the performance. We have the switch to unleaded fuel, we have increasing emission standards, and we have antiquated engines that they're using super large bores, super large capacity engines in order to get the horsepower up. But then they run them super low compression in order to meet the emissions requirements and the economy requirements. It's just a very strange era that we're in right now. So we'll see what we can do as a company. Okay, this body has some nice morphing to it. I don't even know if this is a stock body or a modded body. I can't keep track anymore. But very nice job on this one. As soon as I was able to drag this back, I fell in love with it because I like that look a lot. Makes this body look a lot sportier than it had originally did. It's going to be interesting to fixture around this guy, but the only thing I really don't like about it is the way this Windows belt line kind of swoops down. I'd rather it be straight to like here, but that's not something we can change. And then the hood's very high, so I mean it looks like an engine bay that's going to take quite a large engine, even though that's not the direction I necessarily want to take it. As far as the chassis goes, a lot of the cars in this era are starting to finally move to unibody construction. There's still some body-on-frames around, but our company has been pretty steadfast on the whole unibody setup, so we will, of course, be continuing that. Steel-bodied, I don't think it's the time to be trying a front-wheel drive transverse setup. This is too large of a car, and that's just a little too strange for the era. It might confuse our customers, might be a little off-putting to them. So let's not go too crazy there. But look for maybe us trying some stuff like that with our other models. In the front, I'm going to go with a McPherson strut setup because I do want this to be a somewhat sporty vehicle. We are a company based around sporty vehicles. In the rear, I'm going to do semi-trailing arm, and for the body, we'll just do plain old steel. Fixtures. I feel that I'm going to struggle with this one. We'll see what I can come up with. Hopefully it's something interesting, or at least not ugly. Alright, I think I'm done with the body. I realize now that I had chosen transverse. I guess I was talking about it so much that I just clicked it out of, secondary brain functions. Wait, do I have 2 brain functions? Probably not. I went pretty simple for the body. This is going to be the base model, and I don't think it's too bad at all. For the base model anyway. Has a lot of room for improvement for some sportier models, I think. But I'm pretty pleased. For the era, I think to be a little bit more era correct, it would have a much larger chrome bumper. Like, it would take up this entire place. But if we can get away with this skinny little chrome bumper, that's fine. Won't hear me complaining about that, because it looks a lot better. Again, simple in the back, and hopefully we can spice this up for some kind of performance version of the car. It's got a little bit of a weird body line through here, like it's a little saggy in the middle. But I don't know. Sedans are weird to me, so I'm not very good with the whole sedan body thing. These fenders are way too big now. Way too big. There we go. That's a little better. So let's move on to an engine. Well, let's name this one the base model. You see, it doesn't have a name yet. I'll discuss that later. But moving on to the engine, we're going to do something new. We're not going to use any of our old engines because that's a mistake I see everybody else making. They're just throwing their old, tried and true engines, just with less compression and less power and less fun. And it works for them. Obviously, it's cheap to do it that way. They're producing probably a cheaper vehicle than we are going to be able to produce here, but we want to be able to produce a better vehicle. Now, most of these cars in this kind of category will come with a straight 6 in their base model trim. Even those straight 6 engines, though, although the power gap is no longer what it once was, there used to be, a 1 to 200 horsepower gap between the 6-cylinder and the V8. That gap is starting to close in now, but there's still a gap there. So I still feel as though there's a need for 2 different engines for this car. So we'll start with the inline 6. Although we do have V6s available. Is there an advantage to us building a V6? Is there other cars we could use a V6 in? Now, personally, V6s are not my favorite. However, there is definitely the potential, as we're moving forward into this new weird era, that a V6 could be pretty important to us. So let's give it a shot. Okay, so for the base engine, I want to give it about a 3-liter capacity. I'm going to probably bring that down, but I want to have the ability to make this engine larger in the future if needed, because I want it to be, like I said, usable for a lot of different cars, not just this one. That is a smart business move for us. And then in this one over here, I can bring that board down, bring the stroke down a little, just to bring down that capacity a bit. Does this actually make it easier on the valves? I don't think it does. Because it's not actually, when you're changing the variant capacity, it does not necessarily change the size of the engine. So it doesn't seem to affect like the strain on the valves and things like that. Although we're not doing too bad there. But 2.8 liters, that sounds like a number that I could work with. In the compression department, we are now working with this unleaded fuel, which means that we're not working with a whole lot of compression, especially with the carbureted setup. 8.5 was actually pretty close, so apparently my gut feeling there was pretty accurate. And then in the fuel system, we went with a 2-barrel carburetor twins. That was good for 269 horsepower. How much are we actually making at the moment? Let's see. Yep, too far. You went too far. That's the screen I wanted. 136 at the moment. So that could be overkill. Let's see. Let's see what we could do here. 134 would be underkill, though. Doesn't choke it down too bad. I mean, it just didn't really lose a ton of power there. The economy suffers a little bit through that. What about with this one? Yeah, I don't think so. Yeah, I think we could probably get away with the single barrel Two-barrel. Single barrel? Two-barrel single carburetor. Easy for me to say. I noticed that the fuel mix, we can go a little bit more aggressive with the richness with this setup. So this is much higher than we've seen it previously. I guess that's something to do with the unleaded versus leaded. I don't know. That's not something I'm terribly familiar with. So feel free to help me out there. We'll lower the RPM a little bit, get everything nice and happy. Super reliable at the moment, and that is a good thing. The exhaust size is good. That is 152 horsepower for the whole thing. Would it be better with dual? Obviously, it would have to be very small dual. And I don't think it's probably necessary for this model. So we'll keep it in the single configuration. And we threw a two-way catalytic converter on there, trying to future-proof this thing. We don't want to get into any kind of trouble. So if we design it with a cat on there right now, we know that those regulations are in the works. They're getting stronger, so we don't want to design this thing without a cat and then have to choke it down. So this little tiny 2.8 liter V6 is currently making 131 horsepower and 144 foot-pounds of torque. That doesn't sound like huge numbers, but keep in mind that out of the 302s and 351s of the day from the Fords, you're only talking in the low 200s as far as horsepower. So that is a number that I think we can probably work with. I would like to get that economy above 10% though. That's pretty embarrassing. Alright, now I think I'm moderately happy with this engine at this point. This is a very, very difficult era to build an engine, not gonna lie. 11.93 economy is abysmal by our previous kind of numbers, but it's kind of the best I was able to get out of it for right now. But before we move on to the trims, I'm actually going to design the other engine for this car, and this will be another engine that will be seeing a lot of use in our other cars. So I kind of want to keep it, again, very variable. So these two engines may have to carry us through the entire 1970s. So they just need to have a lot of adjustability to them. So we're not going to hold back on this one. We're going to go for a little bit of experimentation on this engine. Now, this is a tough era to be doing that in, but I think it's what could make our company really thrive. I'm starting to see some weakness in the other American manufacturers, and we want to try and take advantage of that weakness with some new technology, even some continued technology. We were pushing some of this stuff even in the 60s, so hopefully that experience will help us out here. And now that I think it's a little bit more important to be doing this stuff, the higher price tag should be more acceptable to people. So here's the question. Can we make a overhead cam 3-valve per cylinder engine with mechanical fuel injection cost effective enough to be able to use in our regular cars? This is not something I've seen other manufacturers do. We want to try and do it. I want to try and do it. I want to try and make it work. Again, in this era of low compression, high capacity, we are seeing high torque numbers, 299, and lower horsepower numbers, 265. I really want to get that to cross the 300 horsepower mark. We'll see if we can do it. The economy on this one is actually already better than the V6, thanks to that mechanical fuel injection. I just don't think we can afford it on our base model car. If we can't get enough people to buy the car, it will never pick up the momentum, so it definitely needs to have that cheaper option too. Couldn't quite get to the 300 horsepower mark, but got to the 310 foot-pounds, and it's a very nice running engine. It's got a lot of peak power, but a very nice mid-band too, so it should be a very drivable engine. I think it's going to be a good combo for us, and like I said, hopefully it has a lot of variability to it. We can do a lot of different things with it. Reliability-wise, it is suffering a little. It is iron-blocked aluminum head, which is a difficult combo to pull off, but I'm really interested in the weight savings in that, and hoping that that can help our overall economy in the end. Alright, the initial build on the base model gives us very good news. Initially, it has great family and family sport values. It is doing pretty well, and I haven't even tuned it, so that is encouraging. And let's see, it looks like we maybe could use a little bit more overdrive. Would help us out with the wheel spin, would help us out with the miles per gallon as well. The 0 to 60 is pretty abysmal, 11.8. Sadly, that is a little bit just kind of error correct. Hopefully that era doesn't last too terribly long, and hopefully our V8 model has a better one as well. Handling wise, the car is pretty much where we need it to be. It's extremely drivable, a little bit sporty but not terribly sporty, and everything that I chose was pretty much on the cheap side. Medium compound tires on 14s, that's a pretty good size wheel, and just steel wheels there. Brake wise, let's see, looks like we are underperforming on the front brakes. There's not too much more I can do as far as rotor goes. I could throw a 2-piston caliper under there, and okay, that helps us out in family sport quite a bit. Looks like it might hurt in family. I think cost is our, no, it actually does help the family enough that it doesn't, the affordability isn't super high, but it doesn't hurt it enough that I think it's not worth doing. So we will keep that. The rear brakes are pretty much performing on par, but we could make them a little bit larger. Okay, there we go. I think that is good. We're not getting a lot of brake fade, and it seems very drivable. Here, there's not much we can do. That is all set. And on the interior side of things, I went for 5 seats on a standard interior on this one. Didn't go for the basic. Not what we would think to be our entry-level car, so we don't want it to have too stripped out of an interior. Decided to go for a 8-track, a standard 8-track. Come on, you're not going to get that anywhere else. Power steering and a standard safety. And let's look at here. The family sport is 16% drivability, 17% sportiness. So it's surprising that we're doing that well with a 5.4 sportiness, but that just kind of goes to show the competition we're going against in this era definitely struggles in those regards. The comfort is 10%, prestige 11%, safety is 18.3%, and that is probably good for family as well. Yes, it's even more important on the family. Let's go to advanced safety. That is a very important thing. It does hurt our affordability, but it makes the cars extremely desirable, and I think that is the main thing I want. I want our cars to be very desirable enough that people are willing to pay a little bit more for them. Handling wise, I do know I need to increase the front dampers because it is a nose-heavy car, and that is something that will help all the way around without costing anything. Alright, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's look at some of the design overview of it. It is a 3-speed torque converter automatic with 133 horsepower. Oh, that sounds bad, doesn't it? With a cast iron engine. The car weighs 1,172.5 kilograms. Sorry, I still have that on from the BRC. If you don't know your conversion, get out your calculators. And the economy is again not very good, 11.93. What was the miles per gallon on it? 13.3. It's not abysmal, but it's not great either. Really curious to see what this V8's about to do in here. On the test track, it does the quarter mile, and get this, 18.66 seconds. What's the 0 to 60 on this thing? It is 12.1. That's doable. You know, you can at least get it up on the highway, but it's not going to be a super enjoyable driving experience. But then come over here to the markets and look at where it's doing very well in. A bunch of categories. Like, this is a very well-performing vehicle. But it does very well in Pony, and it does very well in Sport Budget, does very well in Pony Budget, Fun Premium, Family Sport, Family Commuter, Family Utility Premium. This is a car that our company has never been able to produce before with any level of success. So that, I think, says a lot about how important this car could be for Vector as a company. Now that the business is out of the way, let's try and have some fun with this thing. Not too much. We don't want it to be a super sports car or anything like that, but I do want to have a more enjoyable driving experience available to those who can afford it. From the outside, the sport model will feature a more aggressive front end with a lip and some nice vents under there that kind of just sharpen up the front, make it a little bit more aggressive. And in the rear, just red taillights, losing the amber indicators so the whole taillight will flash for the blinkers, and a more aggressive lip option in the rear with a larger kind of spoiler setup. I really like that we're being able to carry this kind of look through all of our models, it seems, so kind of gives our brand a little bit of a legacy in design. That is a nice thing. And since we've already designed our engine, we can just go straight to the trim tab, and let's see what I can do from here. Initial build has this car marketing right where I want it to be, in the muscle and family sport premium categories, so that's exactly what I was talking about, just the same car, but for people who can afford a little bit more out of it. And let's see just how much more out of it we can get with some tuning. Definitely need a little bit longer of a fourth gear here, or longer gears in general. And we're going for a manual transmission on this guy. Thought about maybe going for the automatic locker, but it's a lot of money for... I mean, it's a huge gain as far as the 0 to 60 goes. It's just a lot of money, isn't it? But man, it made those a lot better. Yeah, it's not hurting the affordability too much, so let's do it. Initially, the handling is great so far on sports compound tires, 14-inch wheels, 205 in width. I think that is... Oh, I could go a little bit more. Yeah, I think the 205s are working well for the tires. I'm going to give them just a little bit of a quality increase, though. That should help the handling. We do want it to be a nice, drivable car. It's got some great stats on it already. And let's see, we got a little bit more rear brake than we need. We can lose some weight off of those rear rotors. That's all good there. Yeah, that's all pretty good in general. Maybe a little bit more of an aggressive pad. It's getting a little close. In the aero department, looks like the steering is extremely understeery, which is a good thing. That's definitely not a bad thing for a car that can go this fast. I think it maybe has some downforce on this rear lip. Yeah, it just doesn't help a whole lot to take that off of there. It does have a front and a rear lip. So, I mean, we're getting a little bit of aero front and back, but we're not even making downforce. It's basically just canceling out some of the lift. I think it's actually pretty decent where it is right now. The miles per gallon aren't terrible, so the drag's not killing us. Top speed's adequate, so yeah, I think I'm happy with that. In the interior, I stuck with the 5 seats because I want it to be just as practical as the base model. But with a sportier interior, a premium 8-track, I don't know what that means. Maybe it doesn't skip as much, it doesn't eat as many discs. Wow. Cassettes? What were they called? Were they just called 8-tracks? Or were they called cassettes? Who knows? I'm not old enough. Power steering, advanced safety. Standard springs, gas monotubes, passive sway bars, because we don't have anything fancy to do there. Went for a sportier suspension. Didn't do a whole lot here. Do need to do the whole damper adjustment. Someday that will be the default way it is set up. Someday. Maybe. Probably not. And yeah, I think I'm happy. I think this is a really good car. I am pretty happy with it. In the markets, it's an expensive car, 20 grand. I didn't actually mark up the base model, but I'll mark this one up a little. So it's not something everybody can afford, but people in the family sport premium category certainly can. And muscle premium, sport, hyper, super, these are very low selling markets, but it does pretty well in them. Sport budget, it does okay in, but it's not going to sell very many, or in just regular muscle. But once again, it's got a lot of categories it does pretty well in. This is a lower production vehicle, so that's okay. You can see that the lidded ban for this region isn't until 1979, so we're ahead of the ballgame there, and we're ahead of the ballgame in emissions, because there's no big restrictions there until 1981. Alright, I think I am done with this one. I think I'm very happy with this car. It's got great values in the statistics, 31, 24, 20, 33, and 45. Very good. A great practicality of 64.9. That's something our company has never had. And 11.1 miles per gallon versus the V6 is 13 or whatever it was. That ain't too shabby either. So that is going to do it for today, but there's one thing left to do. This car needs a name, and I'm running out of names, people. I need some help. So if you have a suggestion for this car's name, leave it in the comments, and maybe I'll pick yours. Thanks as always for watching, and I will see you next time.